Chapter 1. Mossy gazed at her childhood home, a place she had dreamed of escaping many times. She always knew she would eventually leave, but never for the reason that was happening now. She was getting married.
Don't even think about running away. You're one of us now.
Mossy glanced at her sister-in-law, who followed closely behind. She looked refreshingly young and innocent in a traditional black jacket and white skirt, but nothing could hide the mischievous glint in her eyes. If Mossy got cold feet, it was Bao's job as the maid of honor to stop her from fleeing the wedding. But they both knew that if Mossy wanted to run, no one could stop her. As a chosen bride, she grew stronger every day, especially with Tuso by her side. When she caught his gaze over the head of his groomsmen, her heart fluttered. In return, he gave her a silent salute. She couldn't imagine running away. "Too bad," Mossy said breathlessly. "You're stuck with me." Bao glanced between Mossy and her brother, the latter gazing dreamily at his bride. When the other responded by blowing him a kiss, she muttered,
"You two make me sick."
Mossy blinked as if she'd forgotten Bao was there. "Finally," she said. "Come on. Look at him, isn't he hot?" Bao wrinkled her lovely face.
Gross.
Someone cleared his throat, drawing their attention. Wang Meng, usually jovial, cut them with a stern expression. Everyone but Mossy and Bao had made it to the front door. Like a pair of naughty girls, they giggled and hurried to catch up. It was time. Once closer to the house, it was easy to hear the muffled excitement behind the door. She could even hear her brothers arguing as Shang Mi told them both to be quiet. Their mother snapped for all of them to hush. Mossy grinned. Some things would never change. Wang Meng straightened his tie like a businessman about to secure a prominent merger. His assistant, Joseph Kang, a man who could have been his twin with the same thick hair and pinstripe suit, lifted a black umbrella against his chest. While Tuso's expression remained calm, his knuckles paled around the straps of the woven basket on his back. His best man, Peter Kang, a young man with the bulky arms of a wrestler, adjusted the blanket he carried like it weighed a ton. One might think the party was marching into battle rather than a wedding. Their job was to prove that Tuso and his family were worthy of their daughter. Wang Meng and his assistant would settle the bridal dowry while Tuso and Peter handled interrogations from the rest of the Cha clan. They anticipated a long evening of answering questions, bowing, and drinking everything offered. Nothing was official until the couple left the bride's home with all their blessings. Tuso's handsome features strained under the facade of a polite smile as the door opened to a chorus of greetings. He didn't like crowds or the noise that came with it, and she felt the turmoil brewing around his soul. Even so, he behaved like a seasoned professional, shaking hands and responding as expected. He was used to the pretense by now. It was temporary, but his union with Mossy was forever, and he reminded himself of precisely this whenever someone's energy rattled him. Every groom thought his bride was beautiful, but Tuso was captivated as Mossy followed the rest of the party with a shy smile. Her skin gleamed like polished pearls against the dark fabric of her jacket. His ears perked at the way the pleats of her skirt brushed against her hips. The jingle of coins from her belt was no more than a cruel reminder of the long wait before he could hold her again.
"Look at me."
Tuso silently pleaded and wasn't surprised when she did exactly so. Mossy's mouth parted as images filled her mind of this exact moment in previous lifetimes. His eyes, his smile, and how he tilted his head before kissing her were always the same. Together, forever. This, too, would never change. Everything blurred as they were swarmed with well wishes and congratulations. Her sister and brothers were the fastest, throwing themselves at her before their mother could stop them. But instead of scolding, Blia wrapped her arms around all her children and sobbed. "Mom, please don't cry. You're going to make me cry too."
If a mother can't shed tears on the day her daughter leaves, then she's not a mother.
Mossy clung to her, holding back her own tears. She never understood why her mother was so eager to marry her off. But as Blia cried and stroked her hair, Mossy finally realized that to her, a mother could not protect her daughter forever, but perhaps a husband could. Especially the husband of a chosen bride.
Stop crying, or you'll scare my new son-in-law away.
Blia eventually scolded, but warmth twinkled in her eyes. The idea was so comical that she almost laughed. Nothing was more frightening to Tuso than what was happening now. She turned just in time to see him and Peter lined up before the elders, while Wang Meng offered cigarettes to her father as a sign of their good intentions. She started to smile when she noticed the subtle twitch of his golden eyes and the tight line of his lips. An erratic blue energy simmered from his pores, indicating something was wrong. What was he worried about? The disturbing light in his eyes disappeared as Tuso and Peter dropped to their knees and bowed. Then Mossy, too, was being drawn away. Bao kept her head low and followed the bride like a shadow. She watched out for everyone in the Kang family, and guarding Mossy was no different. And she had promised Tuso she would stay alert. Du Yong was absent but not gone, and he constantly worried for her. It was ironic, really. Tuso Kang had searched desperately for his bride to protect him from the curse, only to fear the dangers she now faced. He was certain that Du Yong might try to stop their union one last time. Bao had no plans to let Mossy out of her sight.
You look so beautiful,
Sarah exclaimed, linking arms with her.
Like a daughter-in-law that's worth $10,000.
Emma agreed, taking up her other side.
1 million, no less.
Sarah countered firmly.
Let's see how many chickens she can pluck in 30 minutes, and then we'll talk.
Bao teased.
Oh yeah? How many do you want? Mossy can double it.
Sarah replied, crossing her arms over her chest.
Triple.
Emma shouted as she turned to the bride.
Right, Mossy?
Mossy stared at all of them with wide eyes. Finally, she said, "You're all insane." Everyone glanced their way when all 4 women burst out laughing. In truth, the only one who could pluck chickens properly was Emma, who had won over Aunt May and charmed Mossy's mother with her skills in the kitchen. Even Sarah had stopped protesting her brother's marriage to his chosen bride. Being locked up in the spirit world by evil spirits had changed her mind regarding the matter's urgency. Now, they wore matching floral dresses for Mossy's wedding, teasing and laughing like sisters. Tai was also fond of her, the real Emma Shangmoa. When they weren't playing video games, they were in the gardens where Emma taught him how to coax life back into a dying plant.
Everything has a soul, including plants.
Emma smiled warmly.
You just have to speak its language.
Tai didn't know about learning how to speak plant, but the Kang harvest looked promising this year. Mossy locked eyes with Emma and squeezed her hand gratefully. Unlike Mossy, who had led Tuso through a painful game of cat and mouse, Emma readily embraced her role as a chosen bride. Whether it was because she'd seen the evil of Du Yong firsthand, or due to her strong sense of duty, she wanted to protect him. With Du Yong still lurking in the shadows, the future was unknown, but together they would fight to keep their Kang shamans safe.
Mossy.
Aunt May pulled her into a long embrace. She smelled like sweet jasmine rice and fresh herbs. When she stepped back and gave Mossy a long and thoughtful appraisal, it was like looking at her own mother.
How do you feel?
Mossy peeked over her shoulder at Tuso, still bent down in reverence at the front of the house. Bowing was a traditional sign of respect given to elders and ancestors during significant events. The Chaw clan was so large that Peter was already showing signs of exhaustion. Tuso quickly grabbed his arm as he stumbled, keeping a steady grip until he regained his footing. Smiling, Mossy repeated something Jasmine said not too long ago. I'm happier than I could ever hope to be. Aunt May rubbed her back, her crescent moon eyes shining bright.
Good.
Then she turned to the other girls and said,
Help her get changed. They'll be ready for her soon.
Sarah and Emma squealed excitedly and ushered her upstairs. Hmong clothes are worn at a traditional wedding, but every woman dreams of wearing a beautiful white dress. Mossy almost wept when she entered her old room and saw the gown shimmering from her mother's arms. How did you know? Mossy cried with surprise.
A mother knows everything about her child.
Leah replied with her nose turned up.
And with the help of her best friend.
Eva jumped out from behind the door with her arms up.
And her baby sister.
Shengmi crawled up from under the bed and quickly came to stand beside Ava. Mossy's mouth dropped. Why aren't you at Tyler's party? Eva strolled over and slipped an arm over Blea's shoulders.
And miss my bestie's wedding? I think not. Besides, Mom and I have been busting the racks for the perfect dress. I hope you like it.
Mom? Eva and Cindy were the only friends her mother had ever welcomed into their home. They became closer after Cindy's death and Mossy's departure to stay with the Kangs. Now, Eva and Blea smiled at each other like accomplices.
Hey, I helped too.
Shengmi insisted with a frown. Thank you, Sissy. Mossy laughed and pulled her into a hug. You did a great job.
You're welcome,
she replied, efficiently pacified with the acknowledgement. Mossy looked at her mother, reaching to touch the soft fabric. It's really beautiful,
Nothing too fancy.
her mother said with her usual modesty.
A long train wouldn't be practical.
It's perfect, Mossy insisted, reaching for her hand. Thank you. Her mother nodded, inhaling sharply to prevent another round of tears. When it was time for Blea to return to the wedding tasks downstairs, she gestured for Shengmi to join her.
but I want to stay here.
Shengmi whined.
There are things that young girls must learn, and things that they shouldn't hear.
Their mother explained, casting a knowing glance at the young ladies in the room.
Now, come along. We have important things to do for your sister's big day.
With much reluctance, Shengmi eventually followed her out of the room. Mossy watched after them with a sigh. Without her, it would be Shengmi's turn to carry the responsibilities of a good Hmong girl. Mossy would have to remember to be a good big sister and check up on her. These thoughts were interrupted when the other girls suddenly swarmed her with excited squeals. They took turns peeling off the elaborate layers of her Hmong outfit. Bao supervised the process, ensuring each piece of her mother's handmade garments was carefully placed in a suitcase. Once that was done, it was time for the dress. It was the perfect blend of grace and sophistication, with long, lacy sleeves and a satin skirt that fell just above the knees. The ivory fabric felt like a soft kiss against her flesh. Mossy touched the thousands of tiny crystals along the bodice that reminded her of the stars. The prom dress she once thought was so beautiful paled in comparison. This one was much more special. As the zipper closed, Mossy met her own gaze in the mirror. She hardly recognized herself. The long braid of her youth was gone. Her dark eyes looked weary and bright all at once. This person saw the world differently and knew things no one should. Life would never be the same again. Mossy remembered Tuso's troubled expression and frowned. She wondered again what was bothering him and what he was feeling now. Sarah must have noticed the anxiety rippled across her face because she brushed away a loose strand of hair and hugged her.
Your heart's racing like a hummingbird's. Careful, or you'll fly away before the honeymoon night.
Sarah laughed when Mossy blushed. Wanting to distract her from her worries, Emma asked,
Want to hear another story?
Only if it's better than the last one you told, Mossy answered with a chuckle. While running from monsters in the spirit world, Emma had distracted them with a fascinating tale about the thunder god who broke the rules. But when asked what rule he broke, she had shrugged and answered,
I don't know.
Now, Emma said.
The point was, he broke a rule and was punished.
It doesn't matter which rule he broke.
It does matter, Mossy wanted to say for some reason.
Do you want to hear a story or not?
Emma demanded as she freed the bride's hair from its tight bun. The girls gave a collective sigh and waited for her to begin.
Thank you.
Emma beamed happily as she cleared her throat and brushed Mossy's hair. There was an enchanting lilt to her voice as she spoke.
Lisa told me many stories while we were locked up, and this was one of the more fascinating ones.
Mossy's mouth parted sadly at the thought of the young chosen bride taken from the world too soon. If only she'd been stronger, Mossy might have been able to save Lisa. As though sensing her grim thoughts, Emma squeezed her shoulder.
A long time ago, everything the gods created lived together in this world.
You mean like the Greek myths?
Asked Ava, her head tilting with childlike curiosity.
Where monsters lived amongst humans and the gods liked getting it on with them.
Kind of. Minus the coitus, it's against the rules.
Eva shrugged as though she didn't mind breaking a few rules while the house smirked in agreement.
In those days, dragons roamed the sea and the skies, protecting the gods and their interests. And when the gods asked these noble creatures to extend their protection to another of their cherished creations, humans, the Dragon King consented under one condition.
Emma's voice dropped lower as though she spoke forbidden words. Mossy swallowed with anticipation. Tiny beads of sweat formed at her temples, while her heart picked up pace. Something about this story felt familiar, like a faded dream. The words conjured visions of figures and faces lost in time.
Every year, without fail, a human bride must be offered to the dragons in exchange for this protection.
A ripple of unease crept through Mossy's veins, her breath hitching slightly at the gravity of the tale.
For many years, this exchange was honored, and for a long time there was peace. Humans thrived because dragons protected them. Then one day, everything changed.
A somber shade flickered across her face, and she accidentally tugged on Mossy's hair too hard.
What happened?
Sarah quickly added.
And don't you dare say you don't know.
Emma ignored her.
A human bride refused to be given away and defied the ancient pact.
The ground trembled, but it was only in Mossy's mind. It was as though the Dragon King himself was shaking beside her. The delicate lace of her wedding dress suddenly felt like a hot brand against her flesh.
The Dragon King withdrew his protection and commanded all the dragons to return to the heavens and the sea. No longer would dragons shield mankind from the dangers lurking in the shadows.
Mossy's heart thrummed faster, her wide eyes reflecting the sun's waning light.
Without the dragons, humans fell prey to their worst nightmares because, as you know, monsters, then and now, crave human life.
Eva chuckled uneasily.
Then and now? You make it sound real.
Sarah and Bao exchanged glances, their expressions mirroring Mossy's concern. It was a luxury to be a non-believer.
The gods saw only one solution to save mankind. They separated our worlds and blessed us with the first shaman, the only human with the gift to travel between realms.
Lost in Emma's grim tale, Mossy barely registered the change in the air. Her imagination painted scenes of celestial beings and earthen creatures, each receding to their own parts of the cosmos. A loud knock on the door startled everyone in the room. Mossy leaped, her hand jumping to comfort a throbbing chest. The figures of her imagination shattered and disintegrated in thin air. As the knocking persisted, Sarah opened the door to reveal Mossy's mother.
It's time,
She chirped, unaware of the tension in the room. It's time, Mossy repeated, as though coming out of a daze.
Come on now. Tuso is waiting for you.
Mossy nodded, feeling a rush of both love and nerves. As she headed towards the door, she suddenly remembered the item in her purse. You guys go ahead. I need to grab something, she mumbled, returning to the vanity.
Don't take too long, or someone may steal your groom.
Eva teased. Mossy almost laughed at the idea. She'd like to see someone try, if only to see the look of confusion and impatience on Tuso's face. Her new husband had more patience for spirits than human angst. "What are you doing?" she asked when Bao continued hovering nearby.
I'm not supposed to leave you alone, remember?
Mossy noted how her legs were crossed as she swayed. "Well, you'd better or you'll pee your panties." For the first time, Bao blushed and grabbed the door.
Don't tell Tuso. I'll be right back.
Mossy grinned and shook her head. Bao and Tuso were two of a feather, taking everything much too seriously. What is she worried about? Mossy returned to rummage through her purse, annoyed that she'd nearly forgotten the most important thing, Tuso's ring. Even though they weren't doing an American ceremony, it didn't feel right not to give him a ring on their wedding day. It was a relief when her fingers closed around a small, velvet-wrapped box. "Husband, he's my husband now," she thought. An unfamiliar rustle drew her eyes to the window. On the other side of the street stood a hooded figure. Though his face was hidden, Mossy knew instinctively that he was watching the house. No, he was watching her. Her spirit guide stirred, a flutter of voices making the hairs on her arms stand. Concern turned across her face as she narrowed her gaze. There was something about the stranger, a familiarity tugging and clawing at her memory. She became more alarmed when the man stretched and clenched his hands into fists.
Mossy?
Bao called from the hallway.
You ready?
She tore her gaze away from the window. "I'm coming." By the time she returned her attention outside, the stranger was gone. She leaned and searched the most distant end of the street to no avail. Was her mind playing games with her after Emma's dark tale? Holding the ring box against her chest like a protective talisman, Mossy turned and hurried out the door. Her family and husband were waiting,